did all that time of setting it up, but I didn't actually start. All right, we started recording. We are live. And so participles theologically have great significance, and recognition of form is typically not that hard to recognize. Translation, though, function can be a little more complex, simply because there's no one straight answer. And so today we're going to look at the last of the participles, the perfect participles. We're going to look at the form first, like we have them. But then we're going to look a little deeper into, after we look at the form of a perfect participle, we'll have looked at the present, we'll have looked at the aorist, we'll have looked at the perfect. We'll also, at the end, do a quick look at future. Like we said, I think it's in the book of page 356 or something like that. I don't remember, maybe it's 376. The 12 present participles, or 13 if you consider Romans, I think it's Romans 8 usage. I don't remember now. Yeah, so page 326, 26 and 27. Romans 8 verse 34 is the one questionable whether it's a future or not. And so it's depending on your perspective, it's either 12 or 13 future participles. Anyway, we're going to look at the very end, look at that. Spend a little time looking at form of perfect, but then we'll spend more time looking at translation, specifically what's referred to as the genitive absolute and the periphrastic construction. Those are more translation issues, and how how they function than they are form. Now, form does matter. You'll see form in recognizing those. But let's get to it. Okay, so as we said before, participle is a verbal adjective. It has a verbal component. It has an adjectival component. Our verbal component is going to include the tense and the voice, right? The tense is the present, the aorist, the perfect, as well as the future, the 12 or 13 that we referenced on Mouse's book on page 326. Also voice, active, middle, or passive. And then we're going to have the adjectival function, which is going to be our nouns or adjectives, our case number, and gender. Okay. Can you still hear me okay? All right, good. Because something came up and said my.
No, you're good.
All right,
you're good.
All right. So, but what connects the verbal and the adjectival component of a participle? What connects the two? What's it called? Samuel?
Sorry, I was muted. The morpheme?
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Jake. Samuel,
sorry.
for the help.
Oh man, I feel bad.
No,
yeah,
sorry. I was muted too.
Yeah, that's the excuse for everybody. Yeah, I knew the answer, but I was muted.
My dog. Yeah, my dog's here in the background barking on occasion. So
yeah, that's fine. I am a Starbucks, so I don't know what noise you hear or not. I think the earbuds kind of help. Anyway, yeah. So we have this verbal function, and we have an adjectival function. What connects the two is going to be the participle morpheme. And really, so you've already learned about verbs, you've already learned about adjectives, and we're just going to connect them with the morpheme and see how it functions as a participle. So it can function adverbally, and if it's functioning adverbally, Samuel, now it's your turn. Adverbally, what is it going to modify?
I couldn't hear you.
If it's functioning adverbally, what is it modifying?
You said adverbally?
Yeah, if it's functioning, can y'all hear me? If it's functioning adverbally, what is it modifying? It's a verbal adjective, but it can modify. It can function adverbally. If it's functioning adverbally, what does it modify?
The verb.
Yes, the verb.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, and Samuel, if it's modifying a verb, will the participle have an article or not?
If it's functioning adverbally, will it have a participle?
No. Will the participle have an article?
Oh, have an article. No, it's an arthrus.
Okay. It is an arthrus. Very good. All right. So now the other function can be adjectival, right? And just like an adjective can function, an adjective can do what? It can modify another noun or pronoun, describe it, limit it, those kind of things. It can also stand alone or stand substantival. In other words, stand as a subject or the object or another noun function, a genitive or dative. So it can function as a substantive or can function as an adjective. And so those things you already learned. We're just applying it here to a participle. This is our participle morpheme chart so far. We'll finish this chart today very quickly. We had, our present tense in an active. It's going to use the present tense stem. It's going to have a non-tense formative or a connecting vowel, right? Omicron or the epsilon. It's going to have a connecting vowel. But here's that participle morpheme. For the new tau, it will be an active voice. And for we're all talking active here. Active voice, and it'll use the usa for the feminine. So the masculine and neuter will use the new tau, and usa will be the for the feminine, right? That is if we look at the verbal form, right, then we have the adjectival form, and the adjectival form is going to function in a 3-1-3 pattern, right? Masculine, neuter, feminine, 3-1-3 pattern. And you learned those patterns before, so nothing new, and it gets connected by the morpheme. So you got this function and this function connected by the morpheme, and there you have it. And that's it. All right. So in the present, use the connecting vowel, no tense formative. Here's our morpheme for the active voice. Here's our morpheme for the middle passive voice, the middle voice, excuse me. And that's the present tense. Now the aorist, let's remember, you can have a first and a second aorist. The difference is in English, we go a regular form, walk, and I want to make walk past tense. Like an aorist, I want to make it a past tense. I would go walk, ed, right? But if we have the word go, and I don't say goed to make it past tense. Instead, we change the form and go went. That's the exact same thing. So our first aorist is called regular because it follows a consistent pattern, walk to walk, ed. That's where most of our English words will add an ed to it to represent the past. But you have other forms in English like go that you can't add an ed to it, and you change the form to get went. Or swim, swam, swum, same kind of thing. You don't put swimmed ed, you get swam. So the Greek does the same thing. The first aorist uses the regular pattern. You like adding ed to it, so for the most part. It uses the regular pattern. It's very consistent. The second aorist is going to be less consistent, and so it's called irregular. And so our first aorist is going to use the aorist active or the aorist passive tense stem. It's going to use a participle morpheme. That's how we know, not participle, a tense formative. That's how we know it's an aorist, a sigma alpha. Or in the passive, the theta eta. Excuse me, theta epsilon for a participle. And again, we have our participle morpheme. Yeah, we already learned that. There's nothing new. And then we're using here, again, the 3-1-3 pattern, right? 3-1-3 pattern for our adjectival case endings. And the second aorist is the same thing. We're using the 3-1-3 pattern. I'm going to correct something in a minute. We're using the aorist active and aorist passive stems, but we don't have a tense formative. We have the connecting vowels, and we're still using the same morpheme endings. The only difference is this second aorist passive is going to really function just like the active up here, all the active with the new tau. It uses a 3-1-3 pattern. 3-1-3 pattern, but all these, and this uses a 2, excuse me, I'm sorry. This uses a 2-1-2 pattern. The middle passive uses a 2-1-2 pattern, except for the aorist active. We did all that. Okay. Okay, I probably messed it up a little bit and bring it out, but does it make sense? You guys understand it?
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense. I was telling Damien last week and Andreas that uh, it, it's a lot,
Yeah.
but the more I look at the chart and try to study the chart, it'll become like I at this point can recognize if something's a participle, generally speaking.
Yeah.
The new tau, the minnow, some other things, sense formative. Generally, I can kind of tell, but placing it into its respective category and then translation is what I'm still working on as well. So
Sure. Well,
but yeah,
that
it makes sense.
is so normal. It's just a matter of usage, really. The more you use it, and listen, I don't expect that any of us can become like scholars and we become the next Dr. Daniel B. Wallace, who everybody looks to. Well, how do you do this? And start translating from scratch, manuscripts. Maybe so, and that's fine. That'd be great. We need that. But if we understand what's happening and we can recognize it, most likely we're going to use tools to tell us that's a present active indicative. But sometimes those tools could be wrong, and you may want to go figure out why does it say that kind of thing. Anyway, so yeah, I think it's a process, and we're doing well. Sam, how about you?
No, I feel the same way as Jake. Is like there's a lot of it, but like
It still makes
with
sense.
like especially with like seeing like the minnow and the new tau and seeing that side of it, I feel the same way as like, okay, I'm looking at a participle. I feel like they're easier to recognize than some of the other ones that we've done.
Thank you. I think you're right. The significance of the minnow, right? And how we use it most often. We use the minnow. The minnow is as the bait for bigger fish.
That's right. That's exactly it.
That was my joke. Okay. All right. Let's move on. Now that we made a stupid dad joke. All right. Now the real question is how do we know how it functions, right? So we went over this. I think this is generally straightforward. But if the participle is anarthrous, then we've already mentioned, Samuel, that it's adverbial. It's going to function to modify a verb. It's going to function adverbial. If it is articular, it is going to be adjectival. We'll leave it at that. And there's a little more to it.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Yeah.
Very, very straightforward question. Is it? I know with Greek, it's not always the case that everything is always something or else. But is it usually the case that a participle without will be adverbial and a participle with an article will be adjectival, or is it generally that, or is it always that?
So I'm trying to remember, to be honest,
sure, yeah, no problem.
Because I get the two mixed up, to be perfectly honest. Now, if I remember right, the anarthrous is I can't remember. Let me look it up.
No problem.
There is.
He's asking if it has an article adjectivally.
No, he's asking if there is a absolute anarthrous being adverbial, an absolute in the sense that the participle is anarthrous. It's absolutely always going to be adverbial, versus, or could it occasionally be articulate or adjectival, or vice versa with the adjectival function, will always be articular. Nothing's having the article, or could it possibly have? And there is a case. I just can't remember which one.
There's you probably would have got to it. It's at the bottom of the PowerPoint.
Okay. Participles with an article will always be adjectival. Participles without the article. That's what I was thinking. All right. I want to confirm that. So the fact that it's anarthrous, right, without the article, is probably going to be adverbial, but there is a possibility something like the Bible. That's the. Thank you for pointing that out. All right.
Well, when studying for like our test, there's that question of what's the major clue that the participle is being used adjectively, and I put usually on there with it will have an article, because there's that there's always it seems like always with Greek there's a exception to the rule.
Yeah, I think here though, and this again, I'm not the scholar, but I'll go back and double. I'm pretty sure that if there is an article, it is always adjectival. If there's not an article, it is most likely adverbial, but it could have adjectival. All right. All right. So if it's adverbial, it's modifying a verb. Then we're going to add some. It basically becomes like a clause, a helping, a clause that describes or gives us information about the verb, like while he was studying, after he finished studying. So we add helping words to make it give sense. If it's adjectival, then you got to say, well, is it functioning attributively, modifying a noun or pronoun? And then again, we make it a clause like the one who was wearing the red dress, the one which no one saw. And so we add helping verbs, and it becomes another clause. And it's function as a substantive, then it's going to function as normally in the nominative case, right? Or it could be the genitive case, the dative case, or the accusative. Now, what you see most often is probably the nominative case. It's functioning as the subject, the one who, right? And then our question becomes our aspect. If it's in the present, the participle's in the present, then it's generally going to function as continuous, and that's why we typically have the ing in there. If it's in the aorist tense, the participles in the aorist, it's that same undefined kind of tense. It's undefined in terms of the kind of action, but we sort of normally put it in the past tense, and we typically took the ed kind of function. If it's perfect, that's what we're going to look at today. Then we just like a perfect tense. Our aspect is going to be this what's called combinative, that is completed action, that has the action completed has some type of impact to the present from the speaker's perspective, right? Now, voice and participles generally do not have a strength, a great strength to them, but the active, middle, or passive, and then the meaning is just going to be based on the meaning of the word and the participle. All right. So all this makes sense in terms of recognizing, now beginning to recognize whether it's adverbial, adjectival, and if adjectival, is it attributive or substantive, right? If it's substantive, there is no other, there's nothing for the participle to modify. There's nothing there. There's like if this is in the nominative case, there's no other nominative for it to modify. It has to agree. So it's probably then standing in place as the subject. That's how you know, right? If it's in the attributive case, there'll be another noun or pronoun to modify, and it will agree in case, number, and gender, just like an adjective does. Okay. All right. That help? That brings us up to speed. Let's talk about perfect participles now. So just like before, our perfect participle, we're going to have a reduplication. Jake, I picked on Samuel. What's the difference between an augment and a reduplication? Think about how it's used. When is an augment used versus a reduplication used? What's the difference between an augment versus a reduplication? You're muted. You're muted. Somebody's muted.
Jake, you're muted.
Can y'all hear me?
Yeah. Of course. Yeah. Okay. All right. So, as I was saying, as I was muted, I don't have a clear-cut answer, but I'll walk you through what my mind's thinking at least. With a reduplication, you have a reduplication of the stem, I believe, and usually when I think of an augment, I think of an epsilon, generally speaking, and a reduplication isn't usually just an epsilon. When I think of the augment, I also think of that chart where you have on the left side, considering the mood at least, indicative mood, you have, present, future, imperfect, I think on the left side, the first something, and then you have the secondary something, and they have augments, if I remember right.
Right. Remember what tenses have the augment? Aorist and the perfect? No, perfect has the reduplication.
Oh, but yeah, you're right. You're right. Aorist, and there's one I'm missing.
Yeah,
Not
because
the
you said it a minute ago, but you said it as on the left side. It's
is it
actually on the right
imperfect?
side. Yeah, the aorist and the imperfect
Okay.
both have the augment. Why
And
do
does
they
it
have the augment, and why not a reduplication? Why do they have an augment? That's my question.
because it usually is in reference to time?
There you go. That's it.
Well, not
Yes,
yet.
exactly. Right. So in the participle, because participles are typically modifying a verb or an adjective, time doesn't play a factor or not much of a factor. And so we won't see generally, I don't want to say absolutely, we won't see generally the augment at all. But we will see a reduplication. That's where I'm going. Reduplication is not associated with time. That's the difference between a reduplication and an
Okay.
augment. An augment is associated with time, but reduplication is not. It's just a characteristic for us to identify really the perfect form. And so we reduplicate not the whole stem, but the beginning of the stem, right? We reduplicate the first consonant, then we'll normally put an epsilon in between so that we can pronounce it. And so we get laluo kind of thing. So we'll have our reduplication, right? We'll have a perfect active tense stem, and we'll use a tense formative. Now, we're going to use the kappa, and then we'll use a participle morpheme. And now, instead of a new tau, okay, it's an omicron tau. And then we'll use our case endings, right? They'll either be for the active, a 3-1-3 ending, or for the passive middle, a 2-1-2 case endings. Now, we don't use normally the perfect had the kappa alpha. How come we don't have the alpha here? Anybody know? Sam, can you look at this and say why that alpha's not there? Kappa alpha is the norm tense formative, right? Our tense formative for the perfect is kappa alpha. But for the participle, that alpha is gone. Why?
Because the omicron
doesn't need it because the omicron tau, right? Right, it doesn't need it. So exactly correct. I just want us to be thinking about why. All right, so we get our reduplication, our perfect active tense stem, our tense formative, our morpheme, and our case ending. And so here's our stem. There's our present tense stem. The reduplication of the lambda with the epsilon added. So we get lalu plus the tense formative, the kappa, not the kappa alpha. That's another clue for us, along with this omicron tau. And we get our case endings, the epsilon sigma. And so we get lelucates. And that is a first perfect active participle. All right, so you see how it's being formed, right? You okay? All right, good. All right, so now we look at the paradigm, and we have our singular and we have our plural over here, right? And so here's our 3-1-3-3-1-3 pattern for the adjectival endings, right? And so we have there's our reduplication, there's our stem, there's our more tense formative. What happened to the omicron tau here, Jake? I got the omicron tau here. Where's that omicron tau? Where's my participle morpheme at? I'm supposed to have a participle morpheme. I've got an adverbial function. I've got an adjectival function. And then we got the participle morpheme that connects them. Where's my omicron tau?
My best guess is something to do with that omega.
Okay, yeah, you're on the right track.
Would it be the
perfect and have a two? Oh, you put 3-1-3 declension. Okay, so maybe Sam is a better guess. I have some things running in my mind. I don't think it's right though.
All right, go ahead, Sam. Give it a try.
Would it be talking about with like the square of stops coming in because of the kappa?
Well, you're close, but that's not. You're close, but that's not quite it, right? So what happens to a tau when it comes up against a sigma?
The tau drops.
Tau drops, so that's gone.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens to this omicron?
the Omicron lengthens with the
right.
alpha and becomes
Well,
the omega.
no, there's no alpha. Alpha gone. Alpha doesn't exist, right? You're talking about
I
the
thought
kappa
with the kappa alpha. Yeah, the
yeah,
kappa.
the kappa. That is not for a participle. The tense formative for kappa. If you see kappa alpha, you're not in a participle. If you see kappa, that's a participle. For kappa alpha, you lose the alpha. It doesn't exist because you're adding the omicron tau. But in our case, the tau dropped because of sigma, and the omicron lengthens to compensate, and
For
it
the
has the
tau.
omega for the tau dropping. Right.
Okay.
The alpha is never there. Okay.
Okay. I thought you said the alpha was there, but since there's an omicron, it's not.
Alpha is never there. That's our tense formative right there. With the kappa. There's our tense formative on down the line. Okay. All right. So we have our reduplication, on down the line. Our stem. There's the tense formative, and here is our participle morpheme. And then we have our 3, 1, 3 case index. And we just keep following that same pattern, guys, that you've already learned. Okay?
Makes sense.
Good.
I will say that's one thing I struggle with the most is the lengthening and the contracting and all the nuances there. I know that was a chapter I missed coming into it, and I can't remember if I watched that listed or not.
Until you kind of really just play with it, like for me, I'm the same way, but because I'm doing it over and over again, it kind of makes I spend time looking at the morphology. Okay, what happened? Why is this here? Why did it go? So the more time you spend with it, the more it makes sense and you start to figure it out. It's just a matter of time, really. And we're going to do the same thing, except now we're doing the middle passive formation. Nothing changes. Reduplication. Now we're going to use a perfect tense, but for the middle passive form. And so our participle morpheme now changes to the middle passive, the mena, mene. And our case endings. Now instead of 313, it's a 212 case endings. That's another clue. Of course, you don't need the clue because that meno, mene just tells you right off the bat. So here's our reduplication. Here's our stem. Here's our participle morpheme that connects the vowel with the case ending. And so we get in our case ending, and we get lu menoi. The menoi is going to be our nominative plural ending, right? So pretty straightforward. Again, we're seeing we're using the 2 1 2 pattern now, not the 3 1 3. That's why there's our reduplication. That's our stem. There's our min, and then here's our menor. Here's our os. Yeah, os for the nominative singular. The u for the genitive. There's our dative. There's our accusative, and on down the line. It's the same thing over and over again, guys. Nothing new. Okay.
Good.
You recognize that, and you recognize the participle morpheme and the reduplication. You almost just cannot miss it. It's so difficult to miss. As like Jake had mentioned, it becomes pretty recognizable. And so that's typically the first perfect is consistent, right? Like we have a first aorist, it's pretty consistent. Like we have in English, we go walk to walk ed, right? But when we go swim, we have to swim instead of swimmed, or go, we go to win. Same thing with the perfect, right? We have a first perfect and a second perfect. So our forms might go from akuo to ake kudpas. It's not going to follow the same pattern. And they're a little more difficult. Anoigo to anegata. Here's the one that lambano. Here's our present. I know it's present because of the mu. Okay. And it's present because of the mu's added right there, where the lam is typically not law, excuse me, law is the root. Yeah, and you see, he uses a totally different secondary ending, and that's just a matter of looking up. Really, several verbs are somewhat irregular perfect forms. They lack the tense formative, the kappa, and the active voice. So they're a little more difficult to recognize. All right, so here's our participle morpheme chart, right? Now that's complete. Our new tau, active, and the aorist passive. And we'll use a 313. Omicron tau, perfect active. And we'll use a 313 for the case ending. Menominee, it's going to be middle and middle passive, except for the aorist passive, and it'll use a 212 for case endings. If you can kind of get that in your mind and you start to see, like I said, I like to work from the outside in. You know, what's on the outside? Do I have an augment? Do I have a reduplication? What's on the other end? Is it a case ending? Is it a third declension or a second declension? When I move in, do I have a participle morpheme, or is it just a transformative? All those are clues. And you just start putting the pieces together like a puzzle, and the more time you spend with the puzzle, the more it makes sense. Okay? This morpheme chart paradigm help? All right.
I'd say so.
One mod, one so-so. Okay. All right, let's talk about how we use it. So, like in the present and the aorist participle, we're going to use it. The perfect is going to be used attributively, substantively, or adverbally. Any of those forms. Same way, right? Adverbial is going to modify a verb. Substantival is not going to have anything else for it to modify, so it's going to function as the subject or the object or some other thing, right? And attribute is going to modify another noun or pronoun. And the emphasis, it emphasizes the completion of the action, the resulting state that completed action initiates. That's the key. Now we're focusing more on the aspect that is a completed action that completed action emphasizes the ongoing effect of the action to the present time, for the present time of the speaker. And so here's my form of the breakdown of it, right? Augment in the present versus aorist. There is no augment for a present participle or an aorist participle. Why? Because time is not a vacuum. But in the present, we do have a reduplication. It's not an augment. We do use the appropriate tense stem. For the present, there is no tense formative, but we do have for the first aorist a tense formative. For the second aorist, we'll have, instead of the connecting, we'll have a connecting vowel instead for the second aorist, first versus second. And we'll use the mu tau or the sigma alpha for the feminine version versus the masculine neuter. And we're going to use a case ending of a 313. We'll get to the perfect. We just did that. We got our reduplication, our stem. There's our morpheme, our tense formative, not morpheme. Connecting now with the omicron tau. That's not there. I apologize. That's wrong. Omicron tau for the participle morpheme. And there's our feminine, the epsilon sigma. And we use a 313 pattern. I don't really know much more other than that's his structure, that's his form, and so the more you see it, the more you get comfortable with it. Typically, participles are really easy to recognize because of the reduplication. Now you got to decide: is it a present participle, an aorist participle, or what kind of participle it is? The perfect participle. Well, if it's a perfect, it's going to have that reduplication. Pretty straightforward. It's going to use the kappa for the tense formative and the omicron tau for the active voice. Excuse me, the masculine versus neuter gender, and for the feminine, that's all I'm saying. Passive participles, same thing. The only difference is we're using the participle morpheme for passive, except for the aorist passive. And there's the complete participle morpheme chart. Everything here to include the perfect and active and metapassive. Okay? All right, that's form. Okay, the time we have left, which is 30 minutes, and it'll take us about that much time. Now let's talk about function. Form should not be a major issue. Yes, there's some things that might be a second aorist or second perfect participle might be confusing, difficult to recognize, but generally, in most cases, you're not going to have big trouble with it. Where we struggle is translating participles, because participles have a lot of variability, a lot of flexibility. We can know the meaning of the word, but then how do we use it in the context?
I feel like that's my struggle with them, is like I can know like this is like see, you know, the breakdown of it and everything, but the translating part is what I have trouble with, like how to properly put that.
Well, at the end of this class, you're still going to have trouble. So
that's good to know.
Not to give you false hope here, okay? It's just difficult, okay? You have to really look at the context very closely. You have to really understand how the participle tense and aspect function, and whether or not it's adverbial or adjectival. Those are tremendous clues, and they help you to build the translation. And so we're going to talk about some very specific forms. One of them is called a genitive absolute. If it's a genitive absolute, what would the participle case ending be in? Anybody? Participle case ending for genitive absolute.
A case ending?
Yeah, case ending.
Omicron right? Sigma?
No. Okay, I didn't ask okay, you're right, but I'm not asking for the case ending. I'm asking what case ending is it? Is it nominative, dative, accusative? What is it for a genitive absolute participle? What is the case ending?
Genitive.
There you go. Thank you. Pretty straightforward. Okay. Okay. That's it. All right. So make it complicated. It's genitive. All right. And let's talk about it. Now, absolute is from the Latin, and it really refers to being loose. So it's a loose translation. Okay. That's what it's talking about. That's why we struggle with it. It's a loose translation. A genitive absolute is going to be an adverbial participle. It is not adjective. It's going to modify a verb. And you're going to recognize a genitive absolute participle because the participle will be in the genitive case, and it will be in the genitive case. And it will provide background information or circumstantial information about what's going on. Now, I say it's an adverbial participle. It's an adverbial phrase because there will be a noun that is also in the genitive case. And so it will agree in the case number and gender, but that phrase is going to modify a verb. And it's being used to give us circumstantial information, you know, or the background information. And because it's circumstantial, because it's background, it's loosely tied to the whole sentence. It's not directly connected, it's sort of indirectly connected. And that's why it's called absolute. And that sounds weird because absolute in Latin means loosely to the rest of the sentence. And it normally occurs at the beginning of a sentence or clause. Right? And both the participle and the subject of the participle are going to be in the genitive case. So let's look at some examples. In other words, they're going to agree in gender and number, right? So here we go. I think this is from, I forget now. I'm going to say, I forget. Anyway, we're going to translate the genitive absolute as an adverbial participle. Okay, where we're going to use helping words, and helping words, if it's in the present tense participle, remember we have tense plus the connecting vowel or the morpheme, or not morpheme, the tense formative, plus the morpheme, plus the adjectival function, right? In this case, it's genitive. Morpheme, M-O-R-P-H. And so, if in fact the tense is in the present, we're going to use a helping word like while. If it's in the aorist, we're going to use a helping word like after, but never of. We learn to do genitive of, the love of God. But for a genitive absolute, it's a genitive that has a noun associated with to it. They're both in the genitive. They'll agree case, number, and gender, but it's going to be used to give us more information about the verb. We don't say of. Instead, we'll say, here's an example. Tate means things, plural. It's okay, tate. Autu, there's our genitive. There's our participle la, lu, tos. Now, knowing what you know, we could see right there, that's a participle, perfect participle, right? Perfect. It's going to be, here's our present tense, here's our active voice, our participle morpheme tells us, right, it's active voice, and there's our genitive case ending, Omicron sigma. That's a 3-1-3 case ending, Omicron sigma. And so basically, Tata things, his, speaking, or saying, speaking. And then I want you to notice this. That is the genitive absolute right there. I know it's hard to read all this stuff. Come on. Here is the main sentence. What is that? Haloi, Omicron.
Plural masculine.
Yeah, plural masculine nominative, right?
No.
There's the subject. That's the subject of the sentence. Here is the this pistuo, pistuson, right? This is a believing. In him. Many were believing in him. There's our sentence. But to give us circumstantial information, it's going to say, Tata auto la ludentas, as he was saying these things, that's the Tata, many believed in him. That's how a genitive absolute right here intends to function. Genitive, participle perfect, a present perfect participle. No, perfect participle. And with the genitive auto. So as he was saying, or while he was saying, when he was saying, or maybe even since, you can make it causal. Since he was saying these things, many believed in him. You can make it circumstantial. In other words, while he was saying, or as he was saying these things, many believed in him. That's where translating of participles become so complex or loose. The note here, so the subject of the main verb is paloi, many, is different. And the subject of the participles are too. It's in the genitive case. You'll never have the subject as part of the genitive absolute. That makes sense so far? Okay, a little bit anyway?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right. All right, the genitive absolute is usually translated into a subordinate clause, right? It's a clause. It's going to be something that is informational, it's background, circumstantial, whatever words you want to use. The exact wording depends upon the tense and the aspect of the participle and its context. That's why it becomes translation can be so varied. And it doesn't mean your translation is wrong versus someone else. It's just that there's, we say translation is both an art and a science. There's a science to it in terms of consistency and its grammatical rules and syntax, but there's an art in terms of, okay, what is the speaker trying to get across to his audience? What's the emphasis here? Well, that takes a little contextual analysis, and there's some variability, associated flexibility with that. Typical translation in a Greek participle tense, right? The aorist versus the present versus the perfect. I will tell you that a genitive absolute will you see mostly the aorist tense. Okay, I'm not even talking about participle, I'm just talking about the aorist tense. And you'll see it, and typically it's aspectual, meaning it's a completed action, right? Just like aorist before. And we typically use after or when. A present tense participle, or genitive absolute participle, will be ongoing or contemporaneous. In other words, while he did this or as he's doing this. But you typically will have maybe a perfect one in the tense, and that would be more like the resulting state since he did this or after having done this. And so those are their sort of first go-to translation helping words here based on the tense and the aspectual, the aspect, kind of action that's occurring. A little more. So typically, I don't know why, this stuff moved, I don't know why. When we look at a genitive absolute, the tense, present, aorist, perfect, or in a passive form, right? You use the present tense when there's a simultaneous action occurring to the main verb, such as tu petru la lumpas, right? So here's our participle. Here's the genitive, tu petru. Here's the genitive. And so this is our genitive absolute right here, where Peter, it has the article because there's a name, it almost always has an article with a name. Petru laluntas, while Peter was speaking. This refers to speaking, saying, and so while he was speaking. In the aorist, it's going to be more of a, I lost a word here, a prior action. Not a simultaneous. So, Jesus, there's our genitive. Baptistas, there's our genitive. This is our genitive absolute right here. Jesus baptistantas, after Jesus was baptized. In the perfect, we use it when it's a completed action with ongoing results. And there's our participle phrase to eslelutantas, which is from eserkomos, after he had entered. And then a lot of passive forms are common for events that are done to the subject, baptistantos, right, having been baptized. So the tense and the kind of action, the aspect, whether it's simultaneous, completed, or prior to, or that kind of stuff helps. Okay, that's a genitive absolute. Key. It's a participle that will end in a genitive case ending, right? And it's going to have a noun or pronoun that's also in the genitive, and the combination is going to function adverbally to modify a verb, and it's normally the beginning of a sentence. After Peter spoke, while Jesus was speaking, and it's going to give some background, circumstantial information about the event. So recognizing the participle and its infinitive form, recognizing there's another noun associated with it that agrees in case, number, and gender. And then you can see that it's a gender absolute. That means it's loosely translated in the sentence and typically would be found at the beginning, almost in a narrative form or starting a narrative, right? While after Peter was speaking, while Peter was speaking, the man was healed. While Peter was speaking, Holy Spirit came upon Cornelius and his family. Those kind of things. So you're totally confused, or you kind of, okay, I kind of get it, but you still got to put it together.
I feel like I'm getting it, just like I said,
Okay.
using it in a sentence. I feel like
Sure.
it's like a board game. You could tell me the rules, but once you start playing and doing it, then you can understand it.
Then the rules make more sense, right?
Yeah.
Jake, how about you?
I mean, like it's gonna take some time, but
Sure. All right. Here's the key.
Jake was just saying this is child's play for him. So.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah, I have no doubt. So a genitive absolute is a Latin meaning loosely fitting. Okay. I know it's really a weird way to say it, but basically it's the participle in the genitive form, and we'll have a noun also in the genitive form, and they're going to agree case, number, and gender, and they're going to be used adverbally to modify a verb, normally leading into a narrative, a storyline. After Jesus was baptized, then the Father, the Holy Spirit came down, and the Father spoke.
Right.
Those kind of things. All right. So recognizing means I got to understand it's a participle and it's in the genitive. Now, whether the participle's tense is present, aorist, or perfect will help you determine how it's what aspect, what event is it, how to translate it, and what aspect it is. Those are the key factors. Okay. I want to move on and talk about what's called a periphrastic participle. Periphrastic, we have it in English. When we use the to be verb, was, is, are, with a participle, that's a periphrastic construction, a periphrastic participle. So it's basically a participle with a to be verb combined with the participle. In English, I am, there's our to be verb, teaching. There's our participle. I am teaching. That's a periphrastic construction. Pretty straightforward. He was teaching. Well, that's our to be verb. He was teaching. That's our periphrastic construction right there. The apostles were, there's our to be verb, being taught. That's our periphrastic construction. Our periphrastic participle would be the being taught combined with the word. So in Greek, the to be verb is the ame, right? And so we would say at didaskian, he was teaching. And there's our aorist form past tense of the ame, ain, didaskon. He was teaching. So now that is a periphrastic construction. Here at Daskian, it's just a imperfect, active, indicative, third person singular verb. He was teaching. You can also say ain didaskon. He was teaching. Exact same thing. I can use this periphrastic construction, or I can use just the imperfect form of didaska. It's okay. Participle, the ame verb, the to be verb, plus the participle is a periphrastic construction. That's all that is. Okay, and it's just another way to do something like the didaskian in imperfect, active, indicative, third person singular.
So, like, you can get both translations by a participle and by the indicative mood. Does the participle relay a sense of time, knowing that. Oh, you're muted, I think. Hey, Dave, you're muted. Oh, maybe he's. Or maybe I'm muted. I don't know what's going on.
No, you're not muted.
Okay.
You stunned him. Question so tough.
That's what it is.
Yeah. Maybe it's something. No, it's not.
We can hear you.
Okay, let me turn your volume up a little bit here. Let me find it. Audio. Test 1 2 1 2 test. Test 1 2 1 2 test. So that okay. It's a little noisy now. Sorry about that. All right. So a periphrastic means roundabout. Okay. So it's a roundabout way, and it comes from the word peri, or a less concise way to say something. To say phrasis. Well, it's to say something. Periphrastic participles, a common way of writing in Luke, especially. So instead of using edidaskin, Luke would say ein didaskon, a periphrastic construction. That's all that is. Okay. But there's some significance here I want to bring out. Ephesians 2, verse 8. For time's sake and because of the background noise, here's our Greek and our periphrastic construction. There's our verb, to be verb, right? Are. There is our participle. There's our reduplication. And there's sozo, there's the passive men, and the oi, the nominative case. All right, and so periphrastic construction has the form to be, the ame, right there, and plus the participle right there. And so, for by grace you have been saved through faith. Together they function as a verbal phrase, right? So here is a verbal phrase, often to emphasize the aspect or the ongoing state, or to highlight something, some nuance, or to stress something, especially in a passive voice, or the results. And that's kind of what we have here. It's stressing something. So let's look a little closer in Ephesians 2, verse 8, why this periphrastic construction matters. All right, so este is a second person plural present tense of a me. You are. So it's present tense. You are, Jake. You are, Samuel. Sesosemenoi. That is a perfect passive participle. Perfect, meaning it's completed action with an impact of ongoing results. Nominative plural, you are saved, is how we would translate it. You are the ones having been saved. There's having been would be our, how we bring across the passive form of it, passive, and the fact that it's a perfect form. It's something that was done, but yet the results continue. You have been saved. This is why this is important. The construction emphasizes both the completed action, the perfect tense of sesosemenoi, the perfect tense, it's a completed action, and the ongoing results or state of the completed action by the present ame, the you are, right? You are saved. It's Paul's way of saying you are now in the state of having been saved, and you might be or you will be. It's not you or might be or you will be, but it is done, and it's still true. So the Greek really, I don't think I have another sense now. The Greek really emphasizes the fact that by using the periphrastic construction, by using the ame verb with a perfect participle, in this case a perfect, something that is present, that was completed with ongoing results.
and it deals with a salvation. And then you have been, but having been saved, you are still saved. And so you have this ongoing component of it. You are now in the state of salvation, and you continue to be in the state of salvation. It's still true. That's the significance of this periphrastic construction and the perfect participle being used. Does that make sense? That help a little bit? Yeah. Okay. All right. All right. So here's the difficulty with periphrastic constructions, though. It depends on what the tense of the participle is, and the tense of the ame verb. So if it's in a present participle and a present ame verb, then our emphasis is going to be in the present. If it's in a imperfect ame and a present participle, the emphasis is going to be in the aspect is going to be imperfect. If it's a future of ame, will be with a present participle, then there's a future emphasis in the periphrastic phrase. If it's in a present of ame with a perfect participle like we just had, right, then it's going to be the translation is going to emphasize the perfect periphrastic aspect, right? That's what one we just saw. If it's an imperfect of ame with a perfect participle, then the aspect is going to be pluperfect. Pluperfect, we looked at very briefly, is like a perfect, except it doesn't have ongoing result in the present. It has results in the past. So it's something completed that has results that were in the past. And then the future of ame with a perfect participle will emphasize the future perfect. So here is where the emphasis comes from. It's the construction of the ame verb and the participle. That's the significance here. And our translations are built based on knowing this construction of the ame verb and this construction of the participle. What tense is it in? That's how we determine the emphasis we put on that translation. That's why Luke uses it so much. He likes that function. That makes sense?
Is Luke really the only one that uses this quite a bit?
I can't hear you. I'm sorry. Say again.
Is Luke the only gospel writer that uses this function quite a bit?
Well, Luke uses it a lot, but he's not the only one. I don't really know.
I was saying, like, he uses it more than most.
To my understanding, but I hadn't really looked it up. That's my understanding, yeah. But I don't really know. You could do the research and let me know in your spare time.
I'm gonna be honest. This is a lot. No way I'm gonna memorize this.
I don't want you to memorize anything. I just want you to see.
Okay, good.
No, you're not going to be tested on any of this. I want you to see how we translate this periphrastic tense or periphrastic emphasis. We're doing an emphasis here. How do we do that? Well, the emphasis comes from the construction of the ame verb and the participle. If it's a present ame and a present participle, our emphasis is going to be on the present periphrastic present, or the periphrastic construction is going to emphasize the present. If it's a present ame verb with a perfect participle, like we saw in Ephesians 2:8, then we're going to emphasize the perfect aspect of the event. Does that make sense? That's what we're doing. That's all we're trying to show. Okay? You don't have to memorize. It's a good slide, a good kind of thing to have in your back pocket if you're trying to figure something out. But you don't need to memorize any of this. I wouldn't memorize it. I don't memorize it. I use the chart. All right, let me close with the last two slides just so you have the whole picture. Future participles. You can look at the ones on page 326 and 327. There's only 13 if you count Romans 8, verse 34. I think 34. Yeah. They're very similar to the present participles, except they're going to use what you would expect for future is a sigma. So here's our present participle tense, and we're going to use the sigma. Remember, our future, use the sigma as a tense formative. That's all we're doing, using the sigma as a tense formative. And so it's going to use the active tense stem. There's our sigma. It's going to use the new tau for the active voice on the participle morpheme. it's going to use the middle min for the participle morpheme for the middle, and for the passive, it's going to use that theta eta, not theta epsilon, but theta eta with the sigma there. So basically, that's our future. There's only 13 of them. I wouldn't spend a lot of time on this, but the rest said, let's see if Elijah comes. Erkatai, he comes for what purpose? To save. Sodson. That's a future active participle, masculine, nominative, singular. Let's see if Elijah comes to save him, right? Jesus is on the cross. Let's see if Elijah comes to save him. So the future participle expresses the purpose in relationship to the nearby indicative verb, erkatai, and its future referring to its relationship to the verb. There's only 12 or 13, so I wouldn't lose sleep over this, and that's it. Okay, that's a lot, and I know it's a lot, but now you've got participles, at least presented, from how to recognize them, whether they're adverbial or adjectival, whether they're and what tense they are. And then we had the special recognition of translations for the genitive absolute and the periphrastic, and those do come a lot. And you want to have some degree of familiarity with those, or at least be understand what that is. If someone says it's a periphrastic participle, well, you won't have an understanding what that is, some commentator, so that you can sort of make sense of what it's talking about. Or if it's a genitive absolute, those are not uncommon, and so we want to make sure we cover those things. Any questions? Okay. As always, Damien and Andres will explain and correct everything wrong.
I have a lot of questions, but yeah, I'll relay them to Damien and see if he can help me out.
Yeah. Relay it to the Damien.
Well, you did a great job, Dave. It's just there's so like.
Well, no, listen. That's how this is designed. This is designed for introducing and explaining and introducing the grammatical and the functional, grammar. But then, really, you got to have time to absorb it, and so you need to do some of the homework and quizzes, but time to ask questions. That's why this is an hour and a half long with another hour and a half a couple of days later. It's set up intentionally that way. Instead of just doing it all in 3 hours, we could do it that way. And when I went to free, that's how we did it. We had a 3-hour class. And, I think you need more time to absorb it. And so I think it works better that way. So, and I like it having someone else kind of give an explanation, because they might have a different way of presenting something that makes it easier to grasp. And they've gone through the same thing.
I like it too.
Yeah. All right. Any questions then? We'll close with that. And,
none that I don't have any questions that won't open a Pandora's box. So
yeah. All right. Well, we'll go from there and we'll figure it out. So next week we're in chapter 31. So we'll be in, now we're having done participles. We'll begin now to look at the other moods, the infinitive mood, the imperfect mood, or not imperfect, the imperative mood. And then we'll get to some unique Greek things, the my verbs, the me verbs, and that kind of stuff. And then we'll be finished. We're not that far, guys. Great job. Keep it up. Don't quit.
We'll do our best.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Appreciate you.
Bye.